What's up, you guys? It's Dimitri, and today I'm going to be giving you the truth behind buying where you live versus renting. Have you ever wondered which one might be right for you? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you a cool perspective using a rule called the 5% rule. I'm also going to dispel some common misconceptions that are portrayed by our families, friends, and society in general that renting is just evil and throwing away your money, and buying is always the way to go. In this video, I hope to point out some points that will help you decide which one is best for you. At the end of the day, it's a personal decision and what might be best for yourself, your significant other, spouse, or your family. So before we get started, let's make sure to hit that thumbs up button below and subscribe for more videos on personal finance, credit cards, and real estate. Okay, let's get started. I'll start off by telling you that I'm a real estate agent here in Houston, Texas, and as an agent, I've helped clients buy, sell, and lease, all three. And so I've experienced it as an agent on that side, helping out different clients and families do that. But also personally, I've rented in the past and I recently purchased my own home. So I have the personal experience as well. These rules that I'm about to tell you about, and positives and negatives, all are things that I helped my clients consider and considered myself with my wife. So let's get started on what is your long-term goal. I'm very goal-oriented and hope that you are too, and in watching this video, that your long-term goal is to build wealth. Well, being that that's your long-term goal, you've got to have the steps to get there. And starting by watching this video or just be curious on how you can best reach that goal is the best place to be. We're going to start off by first, how much money do you have saved? We got to look at the short term. We got to look at today and realize, okay, do you have an emergency savings? If not, I'd say renting is probably best for you because buying a house is going to cost a lot of money. You're going to have to put a down payment of as low as 3.5 or 5%, but on average of about 20% of the home value that you aim to purchase. So that's something that you're going to need to have in your bank account, along with that emergency savings I just recommended, and a little bit of a buffer as well, because on average, you're gonna have to pay between 2 and 3% of the purchase price in closing costs. So add that onto your down payment. So if you're looking at a 5% down payment, you're gonna need to budget for 8% that you're gonna have out of pocket on closing day. Then, if you're purchasing a house at 20%, then it's not 8 or 5%, but it's 23%. So that's something to consider. When you're renting, all you have to do is have your security deposit, usually 1 month's worth of rent saved, maybe a pet deposit. And if you're renting a house, similar to if you're buying a property, you need to have money budgeted for setting up your utilities. They often require you either to put a down payment essentially, or they require you to pay your first bill up front. One of the two, and that's just so that they can be confident in setting up your services and know that you're going to be a client that follows through with them and that they can count on you paying month to month. So these are a few different costs that you have to consider up front. Now, let me dive into this rule called the 5% rule. This is a nifty thing, and now, albeit an oversimplification, to help you decide whether or not it'd be best for you to rent or to buy. So the stock market, which is another great investment, as well as real estate that we're talking about today, excuse me, the stock market averages a return between 6 and 7%. And I get this average from one of the most famous investors, Warren Buffett. He explains that the United States GDP or economy will grow an average of 3% per year. Then you add 2%, which is the rate of inflation. That money grows every year as well. So at that point, you have 5% that you can expect to return through the stock market. Adding on to that, the way you get to 6 to 7% is by the dividends that companies pay you when you own the stock. So that's where we get to the 6 to 7% returns. And for today's analysis, we're going to just average that to be about 6.8%. And I'll give you that reason here coming up. So then if your stock market return rate is going to be 6.8%, we'll say, well, the average US land value real estate appreciation rate is 3.8%. Now, this varies from market to market, and maybe you might have a higher rate of appreciation in your area if there's a lot of growth and jobs and the real estate market is on fire. But in other areas where people might be moving away, industries might be closing down, the rate of return may not be 3.8% or even match that or above it. It'll possibly be lower. This is something that still is not going to be terrible, because when you have your money in a savings account, that only grows at about 0.1%. Literally even under 1%, anything there is not going to be helping you because you have the rate of inflation at 2%, sometimes slightly higher. So at the end of the day, year over year, you'd be losing money by having your money in a savings account. I started off with saying you need an emergency savings, so I'm not saying not to have money in a savings account at all. But in general, if you're looking to build wealth, that's not where it's going to come from. That's not where it's going to be. You're going to need to invest in assets, like I mentioned, real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, maybe even a business that you're starting or you're investing in that someone else is running or starting. So these are different ideas to consider into how to build your wealth. Let's continue on the 5% rule. So the 5% rule states that you're going to have to consider whether or not renting or buying is better based off the following numbers. So when you buy, you automatically have to consider that you're going to be putting that money for your down payment and your closing costs into the house, into the property, and not the stock market. So if we have an average appreciation of value in real estate in the US of 3.8%, and we have an average appreciation in returns in the stock market at 6.8%, there's a 3% difference there we need to consider. So that's our first percentage in our 5% rule. The 3% cost of opportunity, or your money that you'd be putting into real estate versus being able to get your returns in the market. So following that, we have an average around the country of about 1% for property taxes. Now, here in Texas, it's a little bit higher at 2.5%, around there, depending on your locality. But for the nation, we'll average 1%. That puts us at 4%. Now, where do we get that final 1% rate for the 5% rule? Well, that's going to come from the maintenance that we have to do on our properties and the repairs we have to factor in. Because when you own, you can't just call up the landlord and say, hey, come fix this, it broke. It's your responsibility. So that's a cost you need to factor in. That brings us to our total of 5%. It's going to be 1% for the taxes, 1% for the maintenance and repairs, and 3% for the cost of opportunity that we're not investing in the stock market. So the way this works is you take your prospective home you want to purchase, right? So let's say the median house price in Houston is going to be around $250,000. The way you do it is you take that number and you actually multiply it by 5%. Well, when you get that ending number, which is $12,500, let me double check, yep, $12,500, you then divide that by 12 months of the year. That number divided by 12 is going to be $1,041 per month. So the way the 5% rule works is that if you can purchase a home that costs you $1,041 a month, right, at $250,000 purchase price, well, if you can rent somewhere that costs less than $1,041 per month at an equivalent rate of home value at $250,000, if you're able to rent it less than your mortgage would be, it's more beneficial to you to invest elsewhere where you're going to get those stock returns or business returns than to dump it into a property and rent. Or buy, I apologize, buy. But if a similar value piece of real estate at $250,000 is going to make you're going to have to rent it higher than $1,041, then it likely is more beneficial to you to actually purchase the property. So in the long term, this is an oversimplification, but that's a really great way to know, okay, am I going to be gaining money, losing money? Is this going to be working towards my long-term goal, or am I kind of making the wrong decision? As I mentioned before, it's an oversimplification because like in Texas, the property tax rate is 2.5%, here and there. And in this calculation, we only account for 1%. Something that isn't taken into effect in this calculation as well are the tax credits and deductions you're able to take when you own real estate. Well, when you own a home, you're able to deduct your property's interest, right? The interest on your mortgage. You're also able to deduct the PMI, the private mortgage insurance that you might be paying on your loan if you put less than a 20% down payment. Additionally, you're actually able to deduct and take a credit on the property taxes that you pay. These are all up to certain limits, but they are available, and if you don't make a ton of money or your property isn't worth a super high amount, you might be able to take the full amount of credits. What is also awesome that you can take a deduction on both buying and renting is going to be your home office. So here I have a YouTube studio. I work from home for my business and for my company. And so I'm able to take a home office deduction, which you can also take when you rent. The other three deductions regarding your mortgage and your property taxes, they're not going to be able to be deducted when you're paying rent. You're not owning anything. So something else that's really great is that over time, your property, whenever you own real estate, as we talked about, averages a 3.8 appreciation in price in the United States. And so that's going to be something that you can cash out and return whenever you sell a property later on down the line. Owning real estate is also flexible because you can rent the property out. So let's say you own it, you're usually required to live in it for 1 year as an owner-occupied property according to many mortgages. But then after that, you can move elsewhere and you can actually rent that property. There's also the idea that you can house hack, which is buying a place, renting out the rooms, and then you might live in one, you might rent out two others if it's a 3-bedroom house. And those renters, they could be your friends, they could be others you might find who need a place to rent. They actually will cover your mortgage and your expenses. So at the end of the day, they're paying your investment for you and building your asset without you having to come out of pocket for it. Then the money that you would have spent monthly on housing, you can actually put towards investments elsewhere or save that up for another property. So this is something great to consider. Now, this has been the financial part, but there's actually also another part I'd like to mention that isn't always considered when you say, okay, you want to buy or rent. Well, something that I have experienced with a few of my clients is that they don't want to put up with the repairs. We budgeted 1% for the repairs in our 5% calculation, but that doesn't take into effect mentally and emotionally. That's not something that they want to worry about. That's not something that they want to have to consider and budget for monthly. That's something that they want to be able to call the landlord and say, hey, my AC's out. I need you to send the AC guy to fix it, please, ASAP. Or that different light bulbs are out, or the refrigerator might stop cooling. There might be a leak under the sink and a plumber is needed. Personally, owning my house, I like to take on those projects as a DIY and teach myself and learn, often from YouTube. But there's also the ability to make connections with those in the community, those professionals who I can build a relationship with, call out here, support the local economy by paying them, of course, and build those relationships that maybe later on down the line they can service my rental properties. That's something I enjoy doing, but I know many who rather not deal with it, that they want to maybe have to put up with the issue for a day or two while the service technician is dispatched, but then they don't have to worry about financially paying for that cost because it's the landlord's responsibility. And also, they don't have to worry about the burden of coordinating it. So that's something to consider. Another thing is also whether or not you're going to stay in your location for a long term. So if you're going to stay there for a year, that's the kind of the point in time where you should consider whether or not you're going to buy or rent. If financially it makes sense for you, you just need to understand that, like we said, when you lease or rent, you just have to have your security deposit. You find a place, you sign up, you sign the lease, and you can move in. And at the end of your lease, whether that be 6 months, a year, 15, 18 months, even 2 years, then you have the flexibility to either re-sign unless your landlord is raising rent and that's not something you want to do, or you can move and choose a different neighborhood or move cities. Maybe you're moving jobs and you like to try out somewhere else. So that's something to consider as well, because when you buy a home, as we mentioned, that 1 year contingency on being owner occupied property, that's going to stick you and keep you in that house for at least a year. The other part about it is that the length of time to actually purchase a home during these COVID times has been around 45 days from acceptance of contract to closing day. So it's a longer process than just finding a place and signing a lease and moving in. This is going to be a process where you have to coordinate with lenders, with your real estate agent, most likely, with different inspectors and whatnot, maybe some contractors if you'd like to update the property at all, or maybe paint or whatever it may be. So it's a little bit of a longer process, and then that's upfront purchasing, but also selling. So if after a year you're not looking to stay there and you're not looking to rent it either, you're going to sell the property, well, that's also going to be a process, and you're not always guaranteed to make your money back or make a return. It's not always guaranteed that you're going to be able to sell it a year later for a profit or even break even, since the money you had to put as a down payment and pay for closing costs might be eaten up. So that's definitely another aspect to consider when renting versus buying. So if you have any questions, make sure to definitely thumbs up this video, send me an email at dimitrichristy24@gmail.com, and honestly, even comment below, because I'll be here to answer. And anything you might want to ask or anything you want clarification on, maybe a new video that you'd like for me to cover, put in the comments below and I'll definitely respond. All right, you guys. Well, like I said, subscribe to this channel, hit your thumbs up button. I cover videos on personal finance, credit cards, and real estate. And until next time, I'm Dimitri. See ya.